Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Scott Groves, thank you so much for coming on the Mike Litton Experience, bud. I am so excited to have you on. As you know, or as I told you, I'm a huge fan of yours. I'm in your Facebook group. I read your book, Lead Generate, twice. I am just absolutely in awe of you, and I know how busy you are. I just really appreciate you taking the time to be on here, man.
Thanks, man. You caught me in a hotel. We actually just finished up one of our live coaching events, and then I'm headed to a dad's group tomorrow. So this was perfect time for us to meet. And thanks, man. It's always a privilege to be interviewed, especially by, a fellow producer.
So we snagged you just in time. That's awesome, dude. So as you know, everyone has a story, right? And our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today with your life story. And then we can talk about anything you'd like to talk about, coaching, books, whatever. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, buddy. So where were you born?
Glendale, California, 1979. Okay. So that puts me 44 years old as the time of this recording. And until about 2 years ago, I was a lifelong Los Angelino. Thought that I would work until the day I die in Los Angeles and then retire in San Diego. And the world had different plans. So we'll probably get to that.
Yeah. Okay. So you grew up in Glendale.
Yep.
Right. What was your favorite thing about growing up in Glendale?
Well, it's kind of weird, man. My dad was a regional manager for U-Haul, and your listeners probably don't know this, but at large storage complexes, so at like U-Haul storage or pick and save storage or whatever, it's way cheaper for insurance if you have somebody living on the property. And so a lot of my childhood, I lived on U-Haul properties.
Really?
Yeah, because these places would have like an apartment attached to the U-Haul. So like grew up, my dad was a Ryder truck guy and just kind of all in and out of Glendale, wherever we could rent a cheap apartment. And then in my junior high and high school years, we lived in a few, I like to make the joke that I was so poor, I used to live in a storage unit. That's not exactly true. We lived in an apartment.
The manager's apartment as a storage unit.
But talk about being self-conscious, when you're just getting into those junior high school years and it matters what you wear and what you listen to and how cool you are, to have to tell the people like, oh yeah, we moved to Palmdale and I live down on Sierra Highway next to all the kind of filthy hotels. I live at a storage unit at U-Haul. They're like, what? You live in a storage unit? It's just weird. So I grew up, because my dad's job transferred him pretty frequently, I lived all over the Southern California area, out in the valley, up in the high desert, in the Glendale, Burbank area. But to answer your question, the best thing about growing up in that area is my parents knew we moved so much. The one constant they kept in my life was Cub Scouts through Boy Scouts. So I was a Boy Scout from the first day of first grade or second grade, whenever they would let us start, all the way up until the day I left for the Army. And my lifelong friends, ironically, are not, high school, junior high, grade school kids. My lifelong friends that I still keep up with in my 40s, and I'll travel to Singapore, Jerusalem, or wherever they're at, are all guys from Boy Scouts. And so that was the best thing about my childhood.
That's so cool, man. So let me ask you this. Growing up, who was the most influential person in your life?
It's a toss-up. My dad was like by far the hardest working person I've ever met. And so, a lot of my work ethic comes from him. And then, my dad's pretty crude, a lot of inappropriate jokes, always worked in a garage or on big trucks. And then my buddy Bob, who was my best friend growing up, was his father, and he was a leader to us all through Boy Scouts. Bob was the guy that taught me the the more appropriate side of being a man, right? Not
Oh,
to
I
cuss
love it.
women, don't say dude and huh. And you know, my dad worked really hard and provided the best he could for us, and I'll be forever grateful for that. And because of how hard he was working, there's a lot of stuff he had to miss, you know.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that Boy Scout stuff, my buddy Bob was there as you know, dad 2.0, or
Yeah.
second father, I should say.
That's cool, man. That's cool. So what high school did you graduate from?
I ended up transferring in 10th grade up to Highland High School in Palmdale, California, which
Okay.
the only reason people know Palmdale is because of that Afro Man song. And yeah, so I moved up there, and it was big time culture shock.
Yeah.
For the first time in my life, you know, LA is such a melting pot. Moving up to Palmdale is the first time I was exposed to like racial concerns.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just a different environment, right? And thank God for Coach Mike Young. I found wrestling and got into wrestling because, you know, sadly, had I not found Coach Young, who tragically passed away about a year ago, I might have not stayed on the straight and narrow during high
Yeah.
school. But thanks to wrestling and my dad and Boy Scouts and a couple other mentors, even though I was growing up in Palmdale, which is kind of the methamphetamine capital of California,
It is too.
I was able to stay on the straight and narrow. And then I left the day, like maybe a month after high school was over. I left for the Army because I was like, there is no way I'm getting stuck in Palmdale.
Wow. So you just got, I was going to ask you about if you had a sport, and if so, what that favorite sport was. Did you have a favorite subject in high school?
Yeah, girls.
Okay, I got you.
That was my favorite subject.
I got you. I think it was mine too.
Funny story. My senior year of high school, I had wrestling. I was the student body vice president. I was just mesmerized with females. And I learned that I could ditch school and go surfing instead of hanging out in Palmdale. And so even though I had like straight A's my senior year of high school, I had 55 absences. And they had this deal where it's like, you know, there's only like 180 school days or something.
Right.
And they had this deal where if you had more than 30 absences, they just didn't let you graduate. So my mom had to go like throw herself at the mercy of the school board and be like, he's got straight A's, he's leaving for the Army, just get rid of him and pass him through. And they did. I almost had to repeat my senior year of high school, even though I had straight A's.
Oh my gosh. Oh wow, that's wild, man.
Yeah.
So obviously you graduate high school, you go into the Army. Why the Army?
You know, it was kind of crazy. Like, again, parents are great people, but neither of them went to college. So they didn't really quite understand, like, oh, somewhere around 9th or 10th grade, we've got to get you on the college path. You have to apply. So I just kind of blew all that stuff off. And then I'll never forget, there was a girl, Danielle Kumas, and we were in the same class together. And I found out that like we could all go take the ASVAB test, which was the personality test for the military.
Yeah.
And she was kind of cute. And I would be sitting next to her for this 3-hour test. So I'm like, oh, let's go do that. Right. And so I took the test and I scored pretty high. So these recruiters started coming around. They're like, hey man, you know, you could go into the Navy and be a dentist, or you could go into the Air Force and work on planes, or go officer candidate route, you know, maybe apply to this and that. I'm like, no, if I'm going to go into the military, I want it to be like the action movies and blow stuff up. So I'm going to go into the infantry. And the guys,
okay.
We can sign you dummies up all day long.
That's
so
right.
I signed up to go into the infantry. And then little did I know back then, they had this program where if you signed up for like in your senior year of high school, you only had to do 3 years instead of 4 years. So I signed up to only do my 3 years. However, talk about life-changing set of circumstances. At the time, if you only signed up for 3 years, even if you were an infantry guy, they wouldn't send you to airborne school. They wouldn't send you to ranger school. They wouldn't do any of the cool stuff because you didn't have a 4-year investment. So they weren't going to invest in you. And what's crazy is like, had I known that, I would have just signed up for 4 years because I wanted to do all the cool airborne stuff and not just sit in a motor pool in Kansas and like dry sweep and clean up oil stains and drink too much beer. So I would have done that, but I was in from 97 to 2000. My exit day is actually 9/11/2000. So had I signed up for 4 years, I would have done the Ranger School. I would have done the airborne school, all that stuff. And there's no way I'm getting out of the military once 9/11 starts. So it's like, and just a couple of these little weird random decisions are probably the difference between being like a lifelong infantry soldier, and getting out in 2000 because there wasn't a whole lot going on. I was so bored at Fort Riley, Kansas. I volunteered to be part of a unit to go clear landmines in Bosnia. I was like, can I just go somewhere and do something? And they're like, no, you're not an engineer, you're an infantry guy. I'm like, I don't care, just teach me how to dig up mines. I'll go out there and like I'll figure it out. And they're like, it's not how this works, sir. So I got out in 2000 and then almost re-enlisted on September 12th or 13th, and the recruiter talked me out of it. And it's crazy how these little tiny decisions or accidents, as they may be, have these wild implications on your life.
Yeah, it's the way it goes, man. It's like you look at the path, right? And there's no way you could have written that script. There's no way,
no chance.
There's no way you could have known on September 11th of 2000 what was getting ready to happen 365 days later. Nobody
it's
did.
bonkers.
That was crazy. It was crazy. And you're right. If you had been in for 4 years, right, and your separation date was 9/11, there were a whole bunch of those guys that were airborne and all that kind of stuff. They didn't get out.
Yeah, they're not going nowhere.
And the military wasn't letting a bunch of them out, right? They were making them stay, even though they were done their 4 years or whatever. So yeah, man, that's crazy. Okay, so September 11th, 2000, you're out of the Army. Then what happens?
Yeah, I got out of the Army, and all I knew was that, like, my mom's like, you have to get a job with benefits. You have to get a job with benefits. She's been like a lifelong employee of Thrifties and then Rite Aid, and her way of providing for the family, as my dad was jumping from job to job and location to location, was to make sure that we were always well covered with health insurance, right? So it's like the braces, all that stuff for my sister especially. So I was like, okay, I gotta find a job with benefits. And I hooked up with an old a friend of mine, a female friend, and she's like, hey, we got this program here at Washington Mutual where if you work at least 20 hours a week while you're going to college, we'll pay like full benefits. I'm like, all right, cool. I got a job as a teller at Washington Mutual. Yeah, bonus, right? So I can go be a teller, I can get a real job working at a bank, and I'll go to college. So I was going to college full time and working like 20 hours a week being a teller. And anybody who's in the mortgage or loan or finance space will find this funny. They called me in like a couple months into being a teller, and they're like, Scott, they're like, you're horrible, man. You are the worst teller. You're out of balance.
You're kidding. Oh my gosh.
Every day. Yeah. They're like, you're out of balance every day. I'm like, yeah, but like, I'm not stealing from you guys. I'm out of balance like 7 cents, $1. I'm like, that stuff matters.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, it matters. We're a bank. We monitor down to the penny. I'm like, well,
yeah.
I'm just going so fast and I'm talking to so many people, it's like whatever. And she's like, well, I'm supposed to fire you. But you're really good at talking to the clients. So do you want to like take some of these personal banker classes and start doing second mortgages and loans and opening accounts? I'm like, wait, so the options are get fired or get promoted? I think I'll go ahead and take the promotion.
Let's take the promotion.
I took the
I'll
promotion.
take door number 2.
100%. Took the promotion, dropped out of Pasadena City College. I don't know. I think I racked up like 40 or 50 credits in a year and a half, something like that. Got into loans full time and just, rode that wave up until it crashed horribly in 2008.
Yeah. So Washington Mutual, I ended up selling a bunch of Washington Mutual REOs after the crash,
Sure, you did.
Yeah, I did, man. I mean, it was crazy. So, in fact, that was a big part of the portfolio that I sold was Washington Mutual. I did a lot for JP Morgan Chase, and they, bought them over a weekend, right?
Yeah.
That was a little crazy. So you go to work for Washington Mutual, you work up until the crash. Then what happens?
Yeah, it's funny. Anyone that's interested in that story, one of the best financial books, and I'm shocked they haven't made it into a movie like The Big Short or Margin Call or something. One of the best books ever is called The Lost Bank, the story of Washington Mutual. It's their rise and fall, and it's kind of crazy because I know a bunch of people they are referencing in that deal. And you mentioned it, JP Morgan was going to buy them on like a Tuesday or Wednesday, and the stockholders would have been made whole and whatnot. And then some probably illegal deal between the government and Jamie Dimon goes down, where like all the auditors that were coming up with a stock price, they exit Wednesday. Yeah. And on Thursday night, the government calls the bank insolvent and gives it to JP Morgan instead of JP Morgan Chase having to buy them.
Basically signed it over to them.
Oh, dude, the shadiest stuff. And it's crazy because, when Washington Mutual was crashing, I'm
Hmm.
a 27, 28-year-old man. I've never seen a bank fail before. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
well, I'll just buy WAMU common stock all the way down. And a buddy of mine who worked for Citibank at the time, we've done the math, and it's like all of his shares that went down, Citibank went down to like 90 cents a share,
Yeah.
$2 a share. But the CEOs at Citibank drank with the right people in Washington, and Kerry Killinger and the CEO of Washington Mutual on the West Coast did not have those government relationships. Like the net worth swing of my friend who had 40 or 50,000 shares of Citibank versus my 40 or 50,000 shares of WAMU that went to zero. It's like, this is probably what like just entrenched me as a libertarian, is that the government literally stepped in and picked winners and losers, and
They
like,
did.
well, we're going to back Citibank, but not Washington Mutual. So like,
Yeah.
extrapolate this out almost 20 years later. And
Mhm.
my buddy Matt has like a couple extra $1 million in the bank that just got wiped out by Washington Mutual stock. So not that I'm still bitter about that or anything, but I'm
Yeah,
still bitter
no, there's no
about that.
bitterness. You can tell. You can tell you've completely let it go.
Totally let it go. I try to bring it up on every podcast on more reasons to distrust the federal government.
I love it, man. I love it. So after the great crash, and what was the name of the book again?
It's called The Lost Bank.
The
It's
Lost Bank.
phenomenal.
Okay, I'm gonna read that. I'm buying it as soon as we get off the air. So after the great crash, then what happens? Where do you go?
Yeah, I kind of bounced around over the course of 2 years. I landed at Home Services Lending of America, which was like an in-house lender for home services real estate.
Yeah, I
And
remember it.
we
Yeah,
were kind of like, I don't know, can we say redheaded stepchild? We were kind of like
yeah.
the redheaded
That's kind of
stepchild.
what you were. Yeah,
Yeah, of Wells Fargo. They
yeah.
were kind of they were still going through stuff. So, I mean, I remember there was months where like, I'm not kidding, Mike. I would work from sun up till sundown to close one loan.
Yeah.
It was like, go back to the client and get this. Now go back to the client and get this, and go back to the client and get this. And I think in 2009, I made like $18,000. I funded like 3 or 4 loans,
Yeah,
was still driving a,
they documented and conditioned you to death.
yeah, yeah, it
It
was
was
brutal.
unreal, absolutely unreal. Every deal that we got anywhere near them on, we were we were running, another application with another lender, right? Like a
For
shadow
sure.
app, because it was just like we knew what was going to happen.
It
Yeah.
was so brutal. It was so, I mean, it was just, and I'm not scared of hard work, but I don't like dumb work, and we would have this condition list come back where it's like, we need these 7 letters of explanation. And I'm
Yeah.
looking at it and I'm like, well, if every letter of explanation can say anything the client wants to write, why are we asking for the letter of explanation?
Right.
They wanted a letter of explanation if somebody's business income went up. They want a letter of explanation if it went down. They want a letter of
If
explanation
it
if it went
stayed the same.
sideways.
Right.
Yeah, it was a really hard time in the business, but I will forever be grateful for that, because it allowed me for the first time in my career to sit inside a real estate office. So it was Prudential when I first started there, and then they transferred over to Home Services Lending America Finance, mortgage, house loans, or whatever Warren Buffett called it.
Right.
But it allowed me to really understand from like 2009 to 2013 on like how to build referral relationships, how to talk to realtors in person, how to like always be on stage, because
Yeah.
like my deal with myself was, I'm gonna give this the old college try, or I'm gonna go
Yeah.
work, middle management at In-N-Out Burgers.
Right.
And so I was there from like 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. because I'm like, I'm going to be here before every realtor who gets here, and
Mhm.
I'm going to be here when every realtor leaves, right?
Yeah.
And so you end up just putting in 14, 15-hour days, and then working Saturdays, and then going to open houses on Sundays. So it's probably that 4 years from 2009 to 2013 is the hardest I ever worked. And then that laid the groundwork for like almost like I was a couple bucks shy of 100,000 or $100 million a year in production in 2014, back when there was very few people doing 100 million a year in production. And
Almost nobody.
yeah, yeah, and started with Movement Mortgage when they were a very, very young company, and kind of rode that way up, and yeah, it's been wild, man. Mortgages are hard; they can be frustrated. Like working with people can be frustrating. Working with realtors can be frustrating. Building people's financial portfolio can be frustrating, but consider I'm effectively a college dropout who was almost a high school dropout because they weren't going to let me graduate. The business has been really, really rewarding to me.
Well, thanks to your mom, you're not a high school dropout, right?
Exactly.
I
probably
hope you kiss her every time you see her and thank her, right?
Yeah.
Like, thank God for mom, right? Mom goes to the mat for you. I mean, come on. So, I had a similar situation where I was in-house lender for a Century 21 franchise here in San Diego. There's 5 offices, including a relo office, right? So 4 real estate offices. And I had never worked in a real estate office before. I had always called on them. I had gone in as a lender, all that kind of thing. But I'm telling you, there's something to what you're saying. When you work in a real estate office, there's something to it where you just get used to being there. And there's a real honest to goodness advantage to it, because you're a lender, but you feel like you belong.
Yep.
Right. Like it's just a different thing where, your competition would walk in and they're trying not to get kicked out. Right. They're trying to make sure that, they see as many people as they can in the small little amount of time that they have before the manager catches up to them.
Right.
For us, we were living there. Right.
Yeah.
It was our ecosystem for years. Right. And it's a different thing. And when I ended up starting my Keller Williams office, it really was, I owned it, of course, but it really did change being in that office environment with other realtors, being a lender. Okay. So I was approved for a Keller Williams franchise in 2000. We opened in 2001 as a lender. I was not approved as a realtor. Okay. I was approved as a lender, but I was killing it. Right. I was a very, very high producing realtor, lender. Right. And because I was doing that, and because I was teaching realtors and all that kind of thing, that got me points for getting approved, right? And I could solve problems for people, right? That kind of thing. But yeah, man, there's something to that being comfortable. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.